It's 9:15 on a Monday morning. You've just helped a child settle with their coat, their bag, and their wobbly start of the week energy, when suddenly they throw their reading book across the room. No warning, no trigger you can see. The teacher looks at you, you look at the child, and your brain goes, "What just happened?" In this video, you'll get a clearer understanding of how neurodivergence can influence behaviour and why what you can't see is often more important than what you can see. But before we move on to that, I just want to say that I am not an expert in this field, so I recommend looking at the autism.org.uk website. I'll put the link to it in the description below this video and in the PDF that accompanies this video series. Now, I also want to say that I spent 20 years of my life living with my first husband, who in his late 40s was diagnosed with what they at the time called Asperger's. We don't call it Asperger's anymore. But he was a local government accountant. When I first met him, I just thought he was eccentric. Very bright. Went to Cambridge University. So I spent many years having difficulty in that marriage. When I started working in education, that's when I realised that there was a possibility that he was autistic. And I was actually helped him get his diagnosis because he tried to find out what, because he felt something was wrong. He knew that he didn't seem to fit in with society, although he does have many friends. He's very sociable, more sociable than me. And he tried to get a diagnosis from his GP, but his GP said it was nonsense, gave him antidepressants and sleeping tablets, which I wouldn't let him take. And so I went to see the GP myself with the evidence I'd written down that I felt meant that my husband was autistic. And because of that, we got an appointment with a psychiatrist who, within the hour, diagnosed him with autism. So my experience also comes from the various courses I've done at working in schools, and the children that I've worked with. But I would say the greatest influence on my knowledge of neurodivergence is living with my husband and his mother, because I suspect she also was autistic. So I was a neurotypical woman living with two neurodivergent adults. And that was quite tricky at times. And so I feel like I have a good understanding of what it's like being with others whose brains are wired differently to my own. But I'm sure if we could have asked my husband, it was equally difficult for him living with me. So his brain worked in the way his brain worked. My brain worked differently as far as he was concerned. He didn't understand why on earth I did the things that I did. So I think we all have to remember that. It's just about human beings who think. We all think differently. We all behave differently. And it's about, a solid acceptance of that, and to move on from thinking that something's wrong. Nothing's wrong. It's just that we're different. But as I say, I'm not an expert. Anything that I say in this series, please, I'm doing my best. The terminology for autism and ADHD, it's sort of changing. So we're using neurodivergence. That covers mainly children and obviously adults with autism and ADHD, but it also covers people with sensory processing differences. Some would say dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, Tourette's. So it's an evolving field. That's what I would say. Right. With all that said, here are 4 things you need to know in order to support neurodivergent children. 1, think neurology, not naughty. I mean, I would say never think naughty, because we've, if you have done my behaviour series, if you've bought that and looked at it, I naughty doesn't exist in that sense. But anyway, 1, think neurology, not naughty. Children with autism, ADHD, sensory processing differences, or a mix of all 3, because that's sort of the main ones we're looking at, process the world in a way that's different from neurotypical children. So, what looks like defiance might actually be confusion, overwhelm, or a delayed reaction to something. So, I think the best thing you can do is to ditch your preconceived ideas of how all humans should behave and get curious. 2, look for the why behind the behaviour, which is what I always say we need to do with all behaviour. Neurodivergent behaviour is communication, just like any other. A child covering their ears might be overwhelmed by sound. A child shouting might be panicking about a transition. You're not expected to be a mind reader, but looking for patterns in behaviour can be a game changer. 3, reduce hidden triggers. Busy, colourful displays, confusing instructions, flickering lights, itchy uniforms, tiny things to you and me, but might be massive to a child whose senses are dialed up to, a million. Can you imagine what it must be like to sit in a classroom when you're hypersensitive to sound, to touch, to colour? It's amazing that they survive in school at all, I think. Wherever possible, reduce sensory and cognitive overload. So, for example, simplify your language or help children sit where distractions are minimal. 4, build predictability into your support. Many neurodivergent children feel safer when they know what's happening next. So, visual timetables, sticking to routines, and giving a heads up before transitions can prevent many behaviour wobbles before they start. So here's a mindset tip. Here's how to shift your perspective if you're finding this tricky. The behaviour of neurodivergent children isn't about you. It's about how the world feels to them. And your calm support can make it feel just a little bit safer. So it's going to be very difficult for you to understand. If you're neurotypical, you won't be feeling the things that they feel. But I think the best way to think of it is whatever, something in your life, say you don't like spiders, all right? Say you freak out at a spider. Well, somebody else can look at you as if, what's the problem? What on earth? Well, that's, I think, how you've got to think about it. We all have things that we find difficulty coping with. And a neurodivergent child in a school that's really set up for neurotypical children will really struggle. And if you can be there with calm support, that's going to make a huge difference to that child and how they feel about attending school. So here's an action you can take. If you choose a child you support and jot down a few notes. Where does their behaviour change? What's happening just before? Is there a pattern? So you don't need to solve it all. Just noticing is the first step to understanding. Now, that child may or may not be neurodivergent, but I think if you just get into the habit of looking at behaviour, finding out, when did it change? When did behaviour start to be maybe an issue with this child? What was happening just before? Is there a pattern? just to get your mind used to the fact that all behaviour is communication. And you can, jot that down in a notebook, but don't put the child's full name for confidentiality purposes. If you approach neurodivergent children with curiosity, patience, and a willingness to adapt, you're already doing something brilliant. And if you get it wrong, that's okay, because you will learn. We all get it wrong. There will be upsets for children who are neurodivergent, because, as I say, schools are geared up for neurotypical children. So there's going to be upsets. The main thing is that you learn from them. Okay, in video 2, we will look at sensory needs and emotional dysregulation. I look forward to seeing you there.